The Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination, SASOD, is among several human rights groups pushing for what they call discriminatory laws against lesbians, gays, bisexual and transgender Guyanese citizens to be repealed. The United Nations Human Rights Council had recommended that the state repeal all laws which discriminate against persons based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. These include sections 351 to 353 of the Criminal Law Offences Act, Chapter 801, which penalize consensual forms of intimacy between adult men in private, with prison sentences ranging from 2 years to life imprisonment, and Section 153 of the Summary Jurisdiction Offences Act, Chapter 802, which criminalizes cross-dressing. Guyana committed to have consultations to address these and is due to report back to the Council in October of this year. There's been much debate on this issue in the public domain, and as such, Roundtable this will include the views of the average Guyanese as well as the religious community. Representing the church in Guyana is Pastor Loris Heywood. He's a member of the Georgetown Ministers Fellowship. We also have a representative from the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination, Mr. Vidyaratha Kissoon, and our third panelist this evening is our viewers. This week we will include the comments as posted on our Facebook page on the matter. Gentlemen, welcome to Roundtable.
Thank you, Janelle.
All right, Mr. Kissoon, your organization has been on the forefront of calling for these laws to be repealed. Tell us a little bit more of your campaign.
Right, so the SASOD was formed in 2003 when the issue first came up for discussion around the inclusion of sexual orientation as a fundamental right within the Guyana's constitution. And many of the people who were affected by discrimination felt that that it was important that Guyana, as it moves forward, is that it rids itself of its ugly colonial past, completely severs its ties with its colonial past, and moves to equality for its gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender citizens. How in law at the moment, this discrimination is enshrined in part of our Criminal Law Offences Act, which criminalizes same-sex relations between men, and in a very archaic, what was loosely referred to as a cross-dressing legislation, which penalizes men who dress as women and women who dress as men for this dubious thing called an illicit purpose. And that second law falls within a body of laws which involve don't shake your mat outside your house after 6 o'clock and things like that, which we still. So the focus of our advocacy, and as we said, we went up the Human Rights Council has reviewed through UPR, Universal Periodic Review, and the government has recently announced that it has to deal with the issue of beating children in schools, and the issue of the death penalty. These are issues that have to come up for agreement. And all post-colonial societies have had to grapple with these issues as, again, legacy of the society that produced slavery, etc., has been these kinds of violence. So that's where SASOD is at the moment. Our focus is on advocacy, education, awareness, discussion, dialogue. We have our film festival starting on Monday night. As one. It's our 8th film festival, and it is one of the forums where you have all sorts of people who come and ask all sorts of questions, and that is the place, because a lot of prejudice is based out of ignorance, and that is interesting, has been interesting as well. So.
All right, before I move on to Pastor Heywood, do you think that repealing these laws, because you've labeled them anti-discriminatory, do you think that if they were to be repealed, do you think that will help with discrimination, or we need some broader form of education?
So certainly, okay. So there are two questions, okay. So let me just talk to two things. One is there's been an argument that those laws as they exist are not being enforced. We've just recently, in that there's no one brought before the courts recently for the same-sex issue. For the same sex, but it's there. And certainly the cross-dressing case has come up before the courts, and that matter is up for constitutional. There's a constitutional matter. However, so the presence of those laws, however, allow for discrimination. We've just launched a report, collateral damage, discrimination against, showing how, even though those laws aren't enforced, how discrimination happens across to LGBT people. And that report was launched within the last month. And it just tells the stories of how people who are going about their daily lives, how stigma and discrimination happens, even against, it not only happens against people who might declare themselves LGBT, but who might be perceived to be LGBT, right? So the discrimination is rampant. As to your second point about whether the removal of laws will remove the discrimination, certainly in Guyana's context, where we have laws against discrimination against women, against racial discrimination, we know that law is the first step. Once you do not have the laws which sanction the discrimination, it's the first step, right, towards removing the discrimination against people. So that is part of, but certainly does not mean, as we know, we've got laws against domestic violence, doesn't mean the domestic violence ended and so on. But certainly once you have the law, the non-existence of the laws will help.
At least this is the first.
It is the first step towards understanding, so that the state does not sanction discrimination. It says the state should not sanction discrimination against people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender.
All right, Pastor Heywood. What is the church worried about in all of this? You've heard Mr. Kissoon's position and their advocacy. What specifically is the church worried about here?
I don't believe we should say the church is worried. We're concerned, as we always have been, with the retention and the solidification of the social fabric of our nation. We believe that any society can only survive, can only prosper if it is based on, undergirded by firm values. Values that inform, values that inspire, values that instruct. Legal systems, legislative frameworks, patterns of living, patterns of being. We're talking here about family life and family-oriented values. And when we speak about legal systems in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean, I think it's useful to draw from the expertise of no less a person than Sir Fenton Ramsay, who was, as you may recall, the Attorney General in the PPP administration in the 1960s, but is one of the most distinguished legal luminaries that the Caribbean has produced. In fact, writing in the Outlet on the theme A System of Justice for a Civilized Caribbean, Sir Fenton remarked, and I quote, "Up to today, barristers wear two bands around their necks, very much like some members of the clergy. They represent the two tablets upon which God gave the law to Moses. In Guyana," he went on, "they have ceased to be worn, but not in the other countries of the Caribbean, where it is still accepted that Christianity is very much an element of the common law," unquote. Law, in other words, has always had values underpinning the legislative instruments, the actual legislation that is passed and which will be enforced. And when we address these issues, they are not peripheral, they are pivotal. These are very significant issues, not just for a few people, such as apparently we're in a march the other day. I was reading in Dennis Shabal's piece posted on Demerara Waves, and he said, "Quite recently, less than 1 dozen SASOD members marched through a safe and short route in northern Georgetown, reiterating their call for the decriminalization of buggery and cross-dressing laws," unquote. We believe that everybody longs for, think LAMP, L-A-M-P. They're the universal needs as captured by Rick Warren in Purpose Driven Life. We all need love. We all need acceptance. We all need a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. We recognize that people have a longing for belonging. And we also believe, and I hope demonstrate, that these essential needs of mankind, wherever we live in the world, are upheld and extended by the church as we promote, in this case, sound family life, sound family values, and the preservation of the social fabric. We believe, and I close this comment with this little statement, that the radical homosexualization of public law and public policy and other aspects of policy engineering that are apparently being contemplated actually threaten to disrupt the social fabric of our community, of our society, by undermining values and so forth. We'll go on to illustrate how and why as we proceed.
All right. You talked about values and the family structure and so on. As it is now, one of the issues, it's rampant. One can say that there is a breakdown in moral values as it is now. Homosexuality aside, SASOD aside, there is clearly a breakdown in values as it is right now. What has the church been doing as it relates to that breakdown of values? And how does maybe you might have said it, but I missed it, but what SASOD is pushing for, how does it go against the principles of Christianity? They are calling for the laws against cross-dressing and intimacy relations between men be repealed or be removed.
You refer to a breakdown of moral values. That in itself implies that the church has been active in saying what moral values are, whether in Sunday schools, whether in Bible clubs in schools across the education system, primary, secondary, tertiary institutions. We cannot speak of values without speaking of the role of the church in sharing, in demonstrating the gospel of Jesus Christ. There are a plethora, there's a range of social ills. And we could assure you that the church has always demonstrated concern from the preventative aspects as well as the treatment aspects, be it domestic violence, be it child molestation, sex abuse. Whatever the issue is, the church has been in the forefront. We're not as strong as we should be, but the church has been emphasizing the value to be placed on the validity of truth, the authority of God and His Word, and the fact that values as taught from Scripture are both timeless and timely. You asked about in some specific wording, about the viewpoint of Scripture on some of these matters. Romans 1 says, although they knew God, let me back up a little bit. The Scriptures teach that every human being has heard from God through conscience, through nature, that the heavens declare the glory of God. And even if we have not heard the gospel, which I was emphasizing just now is the bedrock
because of time,
values.
I'll give you a chance, but because of time, we don't want to go through all of that. So just to get the discussion going, because we have lots of other issues to raise. Mm-hmm.
So you'd like me to quote a specific
Yes,
portion?
and then
In Romans
we move
1.
on to other things.
It says, thinking became futile, foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. These are people who had the knowledge of God, rejected it. And the Bible says God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. And then becomes very specific. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, men abandoned the natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust one for the other. they received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. I just read extracts from Romans 1. So God is saying this is a choice people make. It's an actual refusal to comply with known values. And in that sense, constitutes perversion, constitutes rebellion. But it's always a father's heart reaching out saying, as we tend to say as parents, every generation has to find out that the stove is hot. So when a mother says, don't go near that stove, child, you'll get burned. It's not being punitive, but protective of something, health, wholesomeness that they really want to preserve.
All right. Because of the country's plurality, I attempted to get the view of other religious groups. I've tried to get the Central Islamic Organization of Ghana, but their head is not in the country.
Right.
Sure.
So could I just respond?
I want to read this quote from the Muslim so you can respond to all
because that's a very important point that you raise about plurality. Certainly. It's clear. First of all, I am happy that the Georgetown Ministerial Fellowship lives in a society which allows it to have its freedom of thought and conscience. We all do. However, I'm Hindu. And my God and my perception of God tells me completely different. So how do we negotiate this difference in values is an important aspect. And this has been a discussion that has been happening since a long time ago.
Of course.
From when Guyana became Republican, it's always been at the forefront of how do we, as Loris mentioned, yes, our laws, the origin of our laws was Christian, and Fenton Ramsahai talks about that in that context. And the fact that I think, for whatever reason, our Republican status, Burnham's time was to try to get rid of that background. For whatever, all of the post-colonial societies with plural religious beliefs have had to say, and then even anti-religious beliefs, because some people are atheists. How does the state guarantee all of that? And we know, and I just want to say is that I am glad that the members of the Georgetown Ministry are allowed to believe, but how should that impact on those who don't believe?
Which is why the consultations will take into consideration, will take into consideration everybody else's views, the other religious groups, and this is not only a religious issue; it's much wider. So, but let me just read a quote from the Guyana Islamic Forum. I was trying to get the Central Islamic Organization of Ghana.
They've had a position from 2003 that they've issued already.
So I'll read a quote. The president of the Guyana Islamic Forum is Roshan Khan. You must have known him. He's also the proprietor for RK Security Service. He said that, and I quote, "If there is a law of the land, whether Guyana or any other country, that gays are to be treated appropriately, then that has to be respected. But I've seen some of the walks in the US and the way some of the participants behave in the most vulgar ways. It makes you wonder." This is a concern he has. I'll continue to read. "Another problem I have is the freedom to adopt children and the possible impact on children. Are they going to teach the children to be gay? However, gays, bisexuals, and transgender persons should not be discriminated against and should enjoy the same privileges as any other citizen as enshrined in the Constitution. My Holy Quran speaks against homosexuality, but in a situation of modern times and democracy, they should be given their rights as any other citizen." And I asked him about the laws, as it were, specifically as relates to cross-dressing and buggery, and he said, "Let us go to a referendum." That's all. He doesn't see the Consultation as being very useful as against a referendum. So those are Mr. Khan's views.
So he responded to you directly?
Yes, to me.
You. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a comment a question I posted to him. So I'll give you a chance to quickly respond to that.
Well, again, because SASOD does not engage in theological disputes, when this morning someone sent to me, and one of the joys of being with SASOD has been learning. As I said, I'm Hindu. But I had to learn about Islam and Christianity because of the various things that were thrown at me from the Judaic traditions, which made it seem as though that these things were carved in stone. And what I learned and what we've seen is that there are various perspectives from different people of different faiths. And even as I am not a biblical scholar, and I know, but I trust in what Christian people who are across the board will tell me. I've had an argument. We've had within SASOD a big discussion. I remember one person who's Jehovah's Witness who worked with SASOD, who stood up at our thing and says that he does not. He did some documentary for us, and he had a particular view of life. And the Jehovah's Witnesses just go even further to say that in the Watchtower that they should not be consorting with people who support homosexuality. Okay. Right? So, and I think, in my view, all of these people are Christian. I mean, I'm not going to say that who is and who isn't. Everybody comes to me with their Bible, and I mean, and that's life. That's the reality of our life. So I had a wonderful thing from I want just some interesting thing, because in Obama just came out supporting same-sex marriage. A Baptist minister, Otis Moss. And I think there's some guy, because there's a Guyanese woman who shared this with me first. Young Otis Moss, his father was a very popular pastor, and he said, hold on a minute, just as you were saying, family values broke down when men started to believe that women were property. It's not gay and lesbian people who break down family values. He wrote a beautiful letter to his fellow clergymen. I hope, Loris, I don't know if you've seen it, but I hope you get the chance to read it, to see what he said. And I'm not saying, SASOD does not want, if you believe something is a sin, and we don't expect you to go out and deal with it. Just as Muslims don't eat pork, we're not saying you must go and eat pork, right? The issue is not for us to engage in a theological issue. We're concerned about human rights. And within SASOD, we have different people, different religious backgrounds, right? Who all and in Guyana we have different people who have different religious views.
And because of that,
Swami Aksharananda spoke on behalf of his Hindu view, and he is a Hindu leader.
And because of that,
Right?
the Roundtable wants to shy away from that debate, because we know that Guyana is made up of these different religious groups and cultures and so on.
If I could be permitted to share in some of the things that were raised, somebody mentioned a referendum. I don't expect, actually, in the time frame we have and the limited resources Guyana might have, particularly vis-a-vis the Universal Periodic Review, that there be a referendum on the issue. But it would be beautiful if a referendum could be held, particularly in a society where there's not just diversity, but where there's been a focus on the value and validity of truth, where Christians, who, according to the census, number in excess of 55% of the population, and where God-fearing people who are not Christian are very, very firm about the issue of God made them male and female. The whole issue of gender.
In
You're sorry that
the
God made us
Ramayana,
that way?
no, in the Ramayana, which is a Hindu scripture, he says male, female, and napumsuk. The Ramayana speaks to a third gender. So I mean, you see, this is the thing. This is why it's good.
I don't
it's
want
good
to get
this.
into that debate.
Is that yes, we're mostly God fearing here, but we have different views. We all want family. We all want lamp, and I'm glad that Loris brought that up. But how do we achieve lamp?
Beautiful.
Right? And I
hope
think
to
all
go
of
into
us
that.
are going...
And the
No, I mean...
consultations, and we will get
Sorry,
there
no, but
through
these are... I mean,
talks.
no, what does the state do? Is the state... how does this... What is the decriminalization? What is the existence of these laws? How does the existence of a law which prevents two men from loving one another, if that's how they feel, when there is an aspiration to this thing called love, because of course there are all dynamics of love. And again, Otis Moss spoke to the fact that breakdown in marriages come where there's a breakdown in an understanding of love.
All right,
And,
if we
right,
dwell on this, we wouldn't go on,
Sorry.
and we have other things, and the time is
Right,
quickly
okay.
moving on. All right. Because of the conservative nature of Guyanese society, many of our leaders seem so. I think mostly we are, in as much as much as mostly you can say that Guyanese are conservative, Caribbean at large maybe even. Depends on definitions and so on. But because of that, our leaders haven't been very vocal on the issue. I guess they have their politics and so on. So, but former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ralph Ramkaran, recently in a statement and said, and let me get the quote right, and I quote, "Homosexuality and lesbianism are now recognized as alternative lifestyles, and people should be free to conduct themselves as they see it fit, providing they do not harm others." He added that homosexuality and lesbianism are as normal to the adherents of this lifestyle as heterosexuality is normal to the majority of people who are practicing heterosexuals. They do not see themselves as ill or as having a condition that ought to be cured by counseling or some other similar means, end of quote. Quickly, before we go to a break, your comments on this is the former Speaker of the National Assembly and an attorney, senior counsel, as a matter of fact, in Guyana. Quickly.
Yeah, the idea that people should be allowed to do what they feel they're supposed to do would issue forth in tremendous breakdown in every aspect. We deal a lot as church with people who are on drugs. If somebody really feels a pull towards marijuana, towards cocaine, they're hooked on it, they say, man, I get high on this. Are we saying, as a people, as a nation, as a community, and as legislators, or as senior counsel, that it shouldn't matter if somebody finds that they express themselves best with a knife, with a gun, with, as a student, with sharp implements that they could apply to those who don't quite see eye to eye with them as they come out from lessons. Does that mean that those abnormalities should become the norm? I think not. I think not. We must have reference points.
Sorry. So I am glad that Loris is talking about his fears of what becomes norm and norm, because of course we're dealing with levels of violence. And again, and then there's a woman in Jamaica writing yesterday that she believes that the levels of violence, in fact, a lot of the violence that happens is men who are trying to prove that they're not homosexual. They beat women, they rape women, they kill each other because of their threat to what they perceive as their masculinity. I'm horrified that, because I am someone who is against alcohol, as some of you might know. I'm rabidly against alcohol, probably more rabid than Loris is against homosexuality.
I'm not rabid at all. I don't use
Right,
the
you
term
don't use the word
rabid.
rabid. But the thing is that it's not about an addiction. This is how people, the orientation, the issues of sexual orientation and gender identity are to do with how people's sense of being. It has nothing to do with violating anyone else's rights. It doesn't have anything to do with killing anyone. It doesn't have anything to do with, and the issues of drug use, I'm glad those issues come up. Those are things which we have to address as a society. I'm glad that the church is dealing with that. And we all have to deal with those issues, because those exist right now, and and they're getting worse. With or without, as you said in the beginning, with or without whether homosexuality. You cannot blame gays and lesbians for a breakdown in what is happening. And I think this is what we keep hearing, and this is what Otis Moss said.
No, we're not blaming gays and
All right,
lesbians
we'll-
at all.
So I'm glad you clarified that,
we'll-
because I think that
We'll take a
that is
break.
what I
We'll
heard,
take a
that you were
break,
saying.
and the
that- yeah.
discussions will continue
okay.
after these messages. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to the roundtable. All right, so we are about to start consultations. At least government is facilitating these consultations. We have our views. The nation has its views. What are your expectations? First, Pastor, what are your expectations of these consultations?
Well, the church has already started a series of initiatives, training, public education, empowering, equipping, ensuring that whether we're speaking of pastors and church leaders, community leaders, or youth and youth leaders, they would be aware of what the issues are, how they're packaged, and be ready for very active involvement in the consultations. We see the involvement of the church as being strategic, as being substantive, as being sustained and sustainable. I say strategic because this is a pivotal matter, it's very significant. I say substantial because it is key that we let the Word of God, values and virtues that have served us well, be emphasized and be put out there. And it will be sustained because not just for the consultations and for input into the report, national report being prepared for the periodic review, but so that truth which sets people free, truth that inspires faith, truth that informs life and living would continue to be out there. So we anticipate being very involved across the counties, across the cities and villages, across the regions of Guyana, because the church has a voice, has the numbers, and I believe the majority of the Guyanese populace identifies with these moral moorings, to use the terms of the West Indian Commission, that have served the region so well.
Mr. Kissoon.
Right. So from the very critical aspect of the consultations, we made this known in December after this new dispensation in our governance, where we have the minority government, where we said, first of all, is that very critical in our constitution, I think it's Article 13, which says that the people who are affected by these laws, meaning the gay and lesbian people and those who represent the constituency, have to be very important and very valid as part of these consultations. So that, first of all, that however the consultations are designed, and we know that, whilst, for example, the discussions on corporal punishment have started, we haven't heard much about how these consultations will be construed. We also believe the consultations must have a particular focal point. They must not be about just as, to continue to air things. If it is going to be educational, that the information that is provided in terms of the law, that those information must be clear. Whilst we know that there are different people who believe they have, that all of the views and that access, the government should be making access, and certainly it's not for the government alone, it's for the entire parliament, which is all the political parties.
Which is the government,
Right.
which we fail
But
to
the government
recognize.
is, the government is, but what I'm saying is that it's across the political party, the parliament, sorry, I should speak to the National Assembly, that all of those who are represented in the National Assembly should ensure that there's equitable access to the consultations. So people must not, we feel, intimidated from participating in the consultations, as sometimes happening, right? Because we know that when anytime people speak up in favor, and this is something that we're learning, is that if you speak up in favor, you get shouted down, or you're told all sorts of things. So however those consultations happen, is that everyone who has a view should have equitable access to that process, right?
I believe we should.
And the issue is, and we've made a very important point, and I think Loris made this thing about the issue about referendum, that consultation is not a referendum. And therefore, what we want to understand is what do you then take up? Is it, and this is for the government in the UPR process. What does it mean? When you do these consultations, what does it say? We're talking about all these issues of conservatism and what does the majority believe. In my work on domestic violence, I have been horrified at what I used to think, what the majority believes are. Fortunately, we have, we have change. So that essentially, there is equitable access. We also view the consultation as an opportunity for dialogue. And we think that's very important because we see when we hear some of the things which are being said about gay and lesbian and using words like alternative lifestyles and the homosexual lifestyle and all of that, is that it's interesting what comes over as these perceptions as though these homosexuals are people who live some, and I remember a comment in Trinidad, what is the homosexual agenda? To get up, go to work, make money, look after your mother and father.
The same as any other
human being,
yeah.
right? That is the lifestyle of many gay and lesbian people. But it's made further worse by the fact that you can't get employment because people perceive you to be a particular way and so on. But, so this is the thing which, in terms of the consultation, is that opportunity for that dialogue to happen.
Pastor, you wanted to say something quickly?
Yes, I'm trying to get
Yeah.
trying to
And
get the word in.
sorry, you're doing just like right. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that the LGBT
LGBT.
LGBT. Yeah.
community are the only people affected by these laws.
But they're the ones being discriminated against.
Just
by
now,
law.
you spoke,
Oh,
Vidyaratha.
hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. We have to
Yes.
give everybody a chance here.
This viewpoint, this perspective, is premised on recruitment. It has been observed, focused on the next generation. So that when we speak of family life and family values,
Premise on recruitment.
yes, a homosexual cannot be a homosexual by himself in terms of expression of lifestyle. That is why it is, and another a related issue is that it has been found that a lot of people with gender confusion, not being sure of their gender identity as they grow up and so on, people who are victims of sexual abuse, molestation, violation, and so forth. So that when we speak of the church's view, it's not merely in terms of issues of dressing and so on. This is protecting a populace, protecting children, protecting families, protecting folk who might otherwise be influenced, particularly in a country with a lot of poverty. Sometimes people go to folk of means, of influence, thinking, this is a safe haven, only to be abused, only to be taken advantage of, or to be offered jobs, to be offered perks, to be offered means that they don't have access to otherwise. So they're lured into a lifestyle, taken advantage of, and so becomes an issue of violation. Vidyaratha has been speaking of discrimination. Without calling names, as you look across Guyanese society over the last 10, 20 years, this country is one where highly placed public officials and people in the private sector and other sectors are seen to be, are perceived to be, of a certain sort of orientation. There's not an issue of discrimination vis-a-vis jobs in Guyana. People tend to speak of homophobia. Phobia speaks of fear and hatred. Guyanese are so laid back, we crack a joke, we might tantalize and so on. Had there been homophobia, even that small group that went a safe route would have felt threatened.
I think I
So
must
what
have
I'm
slipped
kind of
something
saying,
just now, though, Pastor.
what I'm saying is that these terms of stigma, discrimination, victimization, it's a language that is used in a debate where, as somebody said, these folk use the same vocabulary as we do, but they use a different dictionary. We need to examine these things very objectively. Is there really discrimination by way of jobs when somebody has that kind of orientation? Is there really discrimination in terms of scope for promotion against people who might have that LGBT lifestyle or preference?
All right, I notice you trying
Okay,
to...
sorry. So my mouth is kind of open, and Loris, I mean, sorry, I've known you for many years, and I wanted, sorry, so Loris, I want to engage you with something, which is you have said you know of. I don't know who these people are. You know of people who are in certain places.
And I'm thinking the same
But
thing
the
too.
interesting thing is, Loris, you said, but I cannot name them. And that is interesting.
I said I cannot or I would not.
No, I mean, sorry, but you would not. Sorry, what did you say?
can.
What did you say?
I can
No, you
name.
said you would not name.
I would not
No,
name
the reason
them.
that you wouldn't
I
name
believe the
is
people who are
because
hearing us could identify with what I'm
no,
saying.
no,
and
but
that
Loris,
for me is enough.
surely, Loris, if it is that those people would not, and I'm assuming that you don't want to name them because those people themselves would not want to name themselves, whoever they are, whether it's negative or positive, is that is first of all the issue of discrimination. And now you talk about sexual exploitation and of poverty, but that is happening in the heterosexual context where young girls, and this is not, so let us just be clear
So
about something.
it's all right because it's happening.
It's not all right. What I'm saying is that when you believe that decriminalizing adult consensual relationships is somehow going to make it worse for young girls than it already is, with all the trafficking and everything that is going on. I mean, why are we, when you talk about how making this legal will make, in fact, one of the things that has happened with homophobia is that young boys do not report child sexual abuse because of the homophobia that prevails in the police and in the legislative systems when they go to report it.
So if you
And let us make it clear, SASOD has...
if you make
Sorry,
these things
SASOD has been very clear. Our age of consent was 18. Our position on age of consent was 18. We've been very clear about the issues of child sexual abuse. Loris will know that I resigned from the Rights of the Child Commission because of an issue that was made, an allegation that was made.
You're not calling names.
About child sexual abuse.
You're not calling names.
Sorry.
Right.
No, but that is it. But what I'm saying is that these issues are... I think we need to know, it's good that you talk about child sexual abuse and the lack of services, but let's put them into the context in which they happen. Sexual violence is a cause of concern in this country.
True.
Right? It is. Well, regardless whether it's homosexual
Correct.
violence, violence of... Right? So Janelle, I mean, I think we our energies, but the fact when you try to detract from it, and then
Detract
the other
from
thing,
what?
to detract, to say that being to make the decriminalizing the laws which condemn same sex is somehow going to increase that violence. I think it makes it seem as though it's only homosexuals who perform that violence, and that is not true.
No, we're not saying that at all. We're not
Well,
saying
I'm
it's
glad that-
only coming from that source.
We haven't
but
heard
we
from
are
our third
saying-
panelist, as we so called it. So
Okay.
we'll
Right.
take a break and come back with the Facebook comments. And these are our normal Guyanese, average Guyanese people who have their views on the issue.
I'm an average Guyanese
for-
person too, I think. For sure.
Well, outside of any
We're all-
organization or anything, have their views. So let's hear what they have to say. But after these messages, do stay tuned. Welcome back. This is RoundTable, a discussion forum on topical issues in Guyana. This week we are discussing calls to repeal anti-gay legislation in Guyana. We have Pastor Loris Heywood representing the church and Mr. Vidyaratha Kissoon representing SASOD. Let's include some of our Facebook responses to question. The question was, are you for or against gay rights in Guyana, and why? These are some of the questions. You don't want to go into much detail. It's brief and have them respond. So first up, we have Janelle Persaud, a New York-based Guyanese. And she said, I quote, "Certainly not against them having rights. They are all human beings just the same. However, I do not support their way of life. Of course, this is not what the above discussion is all about, but I just wanted to distinguish between the two. Also, let's not forget to factor in the potential of these rights to influence positively or negatively our children and grandchildren, etc. In my opinion, if we do a good job by our own strong influence on our kids, then we won't have to worry about other external influences such as gay rights." End of quote. Mohini Marks said, and I quote, "Gays have been around since biblical times. I am neither for nor against gay rights. They'll fight for their own rights just the same way women fought for theirs. However, I'm against violence committed against them. They should be free to walk in society without fear of being beaten, killed, etc. Given the same chances of getting jobs and exercising their profession, etc. Of course, they must respect those around them in terms of behavior, language, especially around kids, as I respect them. We are all different, and that's what makes makes life interesting." All right, Richard Persaud said being gay should be treated as an illness. Those are his views, and I quote, "They should get treated. You were born either man or woman, and if you're a man with feelings of being a woman, it's an imbalance of hormones, and you should be treated with hormone therapy and vice versa for females." Now, two other persons said they were against this, concluding that their religion does not support such actions. Loris McPherson said, and I quote, Guyana is not ready for that. I don't discriminate. It's against my religion to go with gay rights."
This is somebody who lives in Guyana?
Yes.
Okay.
And Deborah Anthony posted, "According to the scriptures, you're either male or female. not otherwise. Therefore, I'm against such, and God will judge such action. And finally, for Facebook quotes, this is a Guyanese who is based in Australia. Yulan Dokwo said, and I quote, "It's funny how people mention being gay is against religion, yet there is nothing to substantiate this. Religion is about doing the right thing and was created by men to keep order and discipline. Who are we to decide what people should be or not? It was just a few decades ago blacks were treated the same way, if not worse than gays. Just a few centuries ago, it was okay for men to sleep with younger men/women. Every generation changes the rules, but the people are the same. We neglect them as individuals and make our own moral rules. Everyone has a right to make their choices or beliefs. They have a right to be gay or not. What's next in Guyana? Are they going to follow Europe to ban burqas and attack Muslims? Politics and religion should not mix. One day it's a racial debate, then religious, now sexuality. God made man in his image, and man, being the gentleman, returned the favor. Think for yourselves and put yourself in their shoes. We have no right to dictate one's sexuality." All right. That's a lot has been said, so I'll open the floors for comments, and you'll get a chance to give your closing remarks as well.
My closing comment comes from one of our national songs, 2 verses of Holly Bryant's Song of Guyana's Children. Born in the land of Kaitior's shining splendor, land of the palm tree, the croton and fern, we would possess all the virtues and graces, we all the glory of goodness will learn. Born in the land where men sought El Dorado, land of the diamond and bright shining gold, we would build up by our faith, love, and labor God's golden city which never grows old. He pointed out in the chorus, of course, that the only way to go onward is to go upward. Onward, upward may we ever go day by day, in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us will show what Guyana's sons and daughters can be. Perhaps he was thinking of that verse in the Psalms or Proverbs. It says, righteousness exalts a nation. Sin, any form of sin, is a reproach to any people.
Right. So I'm glad that
Comments, and then you get to your closing remarks. If you
sorry.
have
So
anything
the
to say.
response to the comment. I think your comments reflect the diversity of how people feel, and one of the things that we've been learning through the film festival and through the engagement is how people have perceptions of how what causes sexuality, and in discussing their own sexuality. I think people need to understand that and what forms it. The view that, how do people become, I had this question asked by me by a politician during the week. How do people become homosexual? Are they born that way, etc.? So these are all ongoing discussions which are necessary as part of the dialogue. And our film festival, which we have happening in June, is a space to have that discussion. And we've had that. We've had all kinds of people come, people who are against, people who are for, whatever. But as I said, it's about learning. Because as I said, a lot of because some of the statements that I've heard today speak to a perception of how lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people are, and how they come into being, which is fascinating for me, because I'm not familiar with some of those things that are talked about. Now, so your Facebook comments reflect that, and I know that just as we talk about, the issue of plurality of religious views, and I think what is important is that all of us who are religious, I am Hindu, as I've said, and my scriptures are different. Your scripture says 2 genders, my scripture says more than 2. So what do we do? And in that, and in fact, in Pakistan, for example, they've recognized the 3rd gender. Pakistan, which is an Islamic country. All right, they've recognized the 3rd gender on their Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So when people are registering to vote, they can, male, female, they can add themselves as a 3rd gender. So in India, so these are where, the countries, the societies from which we come from, what our histories have told us, how people have formed. So in our awareness and our learnings, we have to understand what has been the history of humanity, what has been the history of all of this. The second thing is that the fact that you can have, as some people say, and this is something that you keep hearing, is that how do we live with? How do you live with people who are different, and how does one's lifestyle affect another? And this whole issue of you talk about conservative, and I mean, it's interesting, Roshan, can't you talk about the parade down the road? I remember some of the discussion about our Mashramani and Carnival and how people behave, and what goes on when the shows are going, dance hall, minibus, all those kinds of values that are promoted. And it's the same thing. The displays of overt sexuality. Is it a right? Is it something that is endemic to part of our society? And what does that mean for others who have to witness it and learn? So the values, I understand the concerns from the church, and I have those concerns as well as what exactly are our moral values and how do they evolve. People keep littering all the time. It's gotten worse. Where does all of that come from, or what causes that? So we should have these discussions about values. But our SASOD's point, and SASOD is active in those, because again, we are all part of the society in which we live in, and we have to live together. And so what we also see, because we also have discussion about politics and so on, is that it's important, we are interested in dialogue, in hearing what the concerns are, but we hope to also be listened. So when, for example, we have a report on discrimination, where we hear there's no real discrimination because some people in high places might be LGBT. That's not true, because there are other people. Those people cannot declare, or because of all, and discrimination happens in so many different ways, right? So this is, and again, it just means that this means that we have our work cut out for us to say, okay, do we have to prove this discrimination? How? And as I said, we've started doing that. We just launched a report which the University of the West Indies authored, and there's another report coming out soon, which is not only about LGBT discrimination, but deals with all kinds of other discriminations. All right.
All right. So, because of time, lots of our questions, lots of the questions I had done, we didn't get to go in. But one of the things I want you to say quickly, Vidyaratha, I mean, you're calling, and I think it's something that other people want to know. Right now, you're focusing on these two, these two parts of the laws that affect this. But where does this, because you're saying that this is the first step to ending discrimination and so on. But is there any other thing that SASOD would be looking for in the future? Because there are other aspects of this in terms of marriage and adopting children and all these things.
Certainly, okay, so LGBT people have said, and they're different, I think we should understand something, different LGBT people have different needs depending on their social circumstances. And in the campaign, SASOD is something called a campaign for equality. And our campaign for equality is we're learning, because in Guyana, as we said, the discrimination is not only against LGBT, other people experience discrimination. So it's how do we as a society move for that, and LGBT people are included, whether it's discrimination on grounds of religion, whatever, belief, political conscience. We had a little discussion about discrimination on the grounds of political belief and so on. So our thrust is this campaign for equality, which says that LGBT Guyanese should be part of it. On the issue of same-sex marriage, that is not on SASOD's agenda. Our constitution has already defined marriage. That has not been. But LGBT people have talked about discrimination against them, because when, for example, young LGBT people who are kicked out of their homes want a house lot, because the things that are pushed into prostitution is that because they don't have any access to housing and so on, is that when the Ministry of Housing says you have to be married before, and I remember when this discussion came.
That has changed.
For the low-income house lots, as far as we know, it remains the same.
Okay.
For low-income house lots. So if you're in the old time days when you used to say single, you get yourself sorted out before you go married. I mean, so it's interesting. Some single people said they didn't realize that. So people are all concerned with access to education, that going to school, because there's when in school, some young LGBT people are kicked out. The bullying that happens, and they have to quit school. Right? Or being or whatever happens to them. So those are some core issues. Marriage is not, that's not one of the things which comes up.
All right then. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the RoundTable. Because of time, we're out of time.
No, sorry.
But this is a discussion
Does Loris get to say good closing comments?
He did, didn't he?
Okay.
Yes, you did, didn't you? Please say that I allowed you to give your closing remarks. I wouldn't want to come across as biased.
We can sing the last one.
Just quickly, Pastor.
Because
we're out of time.
In terms of next steps, there is a Christian NGO known as Operation Restoration, which during June will be benefiting from the visits of some folk who have come out of the homosexual lifestyle. It's nothing like demonstrating that there's help, healing, and hope for those who desire change. And in terms of the public education, the seminars that the Georgetown Ministers Fellowship held recently are initiatives designed as part of the church's strategic and sustained response to some recent troubling signs that indicate that otherwise we might drift into the treacherous waters of homosexualization of public law, public policy, and other aspects of social engineering that we believe will be disruptive of the social fabric of the land, and particularly would undermine family life and family-oriented values. Thank you.
That's it. All right, gentlemen, thank you for being on Roundtable this week. Roundtable will continue to monitor the process as it goes along, because I know because Ms. Tashir had said, she's the lead government person on this, and she had said that though we have to present by October, we don't have to conclude. And so this might very well spill over, and we'll be watching, and I wish you good luck, both of you, in your endeavors.
Thank you.
And now for the last word. In a liberal democracy, expression of opposing views reminds us of the sacrifices made by our forefathers. Therefore, broad-based consultation is a must and an essential ingredient in our young democracy. It is only through dialogue in a plural society like ours that we can begin to move beyond misconceptions and forge a Guyana where men and women of the soil, irrespective of beliefs, could live peacefully among each other, albeit in a united effort to develop our country. Roundtable will continue to monitor the consultations and bring you further developments. Goodbye for now.